The warning sirens echoed across the research station like the screams of dying animals. Danny Cole looked up from his work and felt his stomach drop. He had heard those sirens before, but never with such urgency, never with such fear in the voices that followed. All surface teams returned to base immediately, the station commander announced. Her name was, and she belonged to a species called the. They were tall, covered in silver scales, and they believed that proper planning could solve any problem. Danny had worked with them for 6 months now, and he liked them well enough. But he had also learned that they did not handle surprises very well. Danny stepped outside the small laboratory where he had been checking equipment. The sky above 4 was changing. What had been a pale orange color was now turning purple and green, swirling together like paint mixed by an angry child. The iron storm was coming, and it was coming fast. 4 was a moon that orbited a gas giant in a distant star system. The Galactic Council had established a research station here because the moon contained rare minerals useful for building starship engines. But the moon was also dangerous. Iron storms swept across its surface regularly, and anything caught outside during one of these storms would be destroyed. Equipment would be fried. Living beings would be cooked from the inside out. Danny started walking toward the main group of scientists. There were about 20 of them scattered across the rocky gray surface, all working on different projects. Most of them were, but there was also a small team of scientists on the eastern ridge. There were insect-like creatures about the size of large dogs with hard shells and clicking mandibles. They were quiet and kept to themselves, but Danny had shared meals with them a few times. They were good people, even if they were not technically people at all. "Human Cole," called a voice from his left. Danny turned to see a scientist he had become friends with over the past months. Silver scales were darker than most of his species, and his 4-jointed fingers were always moving, always fidgeting. Right now, those fingers were trembling. "How bad is it?" Danny asked. His large eyes blinked rapidly. "The storm has accelerated. We have perhaps 9 hours before it reaches us, maybe less. And the shelters. We are beginning assembly now." But Danny paused, and Danny could see real fear on his alien face. "The standard assembly time for our emergency shelters is 12 hours, with a full crew working at maximum efficiency." Danny felt cold despite the warm air. 9 hours, 12 hours of work. The math did not work. "What about the orbital station?" Danny asked. "Can they send shuttles to pick us up?" "The storm is too large. Any shuttle that enters the atmosphere now will be destroyed before it reaches us. We are on our own." Danny looked around at the other scientists. They were moving quickly but calmly, carrying components from storage containers to an open area where the shelters would be built. They were organized, efficient, and completely doomed if they followed their normal procedures. "Show me the shelter components," Danny said. Led him to where dozens of pieces were laid out on the ground. Panels made from some kind of advanced metal alloy. Support beams that locked together in specific patterns. Power cells that would create electromagnetic barriers to protect against the storm. Sealing mechanisms that would make the structures airtight. Each piece was labeled with numbers and letters. A thick manual sat nearby, showing exactly how each piece connected to the others. It was a beautiful system, really. Modular, reusable, designed to be assembled and disassembled hundreds of times without losing structural integrity. It was also completely useless in their current situation. "How many people need shelter?" Danny asked. 17 total, 12 here and 5 on the eastern ridge. "And you have enough components for how many shelters?" 3 standard units, each designed to hold 6 beings comfortably. Danny did more math in his head. 3 shelters, 18 capacity, 17 beings. That part worked, but the time did not work. And if they only partially assembled the shelters when the storm hit, they might as well have built nothing at all. "Okay," Danny said. He cracked his knuckles, a habit he had picked up from his father back on Earth. "Here is what we are going to do. Forget the manual. Made a sound that Danny had learned was the equivalent of choking. Forget the manual. Human Cole, the manual contains the precise specifications for proper assembly. Deviation from the manual could result in structural failure. Following the manual will definitely result in everyone dying, Danny replied. I would rather take my chances with structural failure. He started grabbing panels and dragging them toward a nearby rock formation. It was a natural depression in the moon's surface, about 50 meters wide and 10 meters deep. Not deep enough to protect them from the storm on its own, but it would provide a foundation. What are you doing? Asked following him. I grew up in Ohio, Danny said, as if that explained everything. My dad bought old houses, fixed them up, and sold them. I spent every summer from age 10 to 18 helping him. We never had enough money, never had enough time, and half the houses should have been torn down instead of repaired. But we made them work anyway. He dropped the panel into the depression and went back for more. Others had stopped their organized assembly to watch him with confusion. One summer, Danny continued, grabbing 2 more panels, a tornado hit our town, destroyed about 30 homes, including the one we were working on. My dad looked at the wreckage, looked at the families who had nowhere to sleep, and said 4 words I have never forgotten. What words? Asked. Danny smiled, but there was no humor in it. We build tonight, everyone sleeps tomorrow. He dropped the panels and turned to face the gathered scientists. They were all staring at him now, these beings from advanced civilizations that had traveled between stars when humanity was still living in caves. I know your way is better, Danny said loudly. I know your shelters are designed by geniuses and tested by experts and approved by committees. I know that what I am about to do is ugly and wrong and violates about 100 regulations. But I also know that everyone here wants to survive tonight. And I am telling you, as a human who has built things his entire life, that I can make that happen. But I need your help, and I need you to trust me. Silence. The wind was picking up now, carrying the first hints of electrical charge from the approaching storm. Danny could feel it on his skin, making the hairs on his arms stand up. Stepped forward, his scales had stopped trembling. Tell us what to do, Human Cole. Danny nodded and started giving orders. For the first time since joining this alien research station, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The storm was coming, but Danny Cole was going to build something that would survive it. Danny worked like a man possessed. He moved panels, cut beams, welded joints, and shouted instructions so fast that the translator devices could barely keep up. They watched him with a mixture of horror and fascination, like scientists observing a new species that they did not fully understand. Which, Danny supposed, was exactly what they were doing. Human Cole said after the first hour, you have not taken a hydration break. Standard safety protocols require fluid intake every 30 minutes during physical labor. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Buddy, I appreciate the concern, but right now the only protocol I care about is the one where we do not die. He grabbed another panel and dragged it to the growing structure. It was starting to take shape now, though shape might have been too generous a word. It looked like someone had taken 3 different buildings and smashed them together while blindfolded. Walls jutted out at odd angles. Support beams crossed each other in patterns that made the engineers twitch with discomfort. But it was coming together. That was what mattered. I do not understand your methodology, said a named, who had been watching Danny work for the past 20 minutes. You are not following any recognizable construction sequence. How do you know what to do next? Danny paused long enough to take a breath. I do not know what to do next. I figure it out as I go. That is not engineering, said. That is guessing. Call it whatever you want. Just hand me that welding torch. The structure was built into the natural depression that Danny had found earlier. He was using the rock walls as 2 sides of the building, which saved materials and time. The floor was the moon's natural surface, which he had covered with spare insulation panels. The ceiling was a combination of shelter components and cargo container lids that he had torn off with a crowbar. It was ugly, it was wrong, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. The Hat eventually stopped watching and started helping. They did not understand what Danny was doing, but they followed his instructions. Bring this panel here. Hold this beam in place. Weld this joint at this angle. They were efficient workers when given clear direction, and Danny gave them direction without stopping. Your species has been spacefaring for only 40 of your Earth years, said during a brief moment when Danny was catching his breath. They have been building structures for over 12,000 years, and yet you work as if you have been doing this longer than any of us. Danny laughed, but it came out as more of a wheeze. Humans have been building things for about 200,000 years. We just did it the hard way. No advanced materials, no computer designs, just hands and rocks and a really strong desire not to get eaten by predators. Eaten by predators. Long story. Point is, when you spend most of your history one bad winter away from extinction, you learn to build fast and ask questions later. By the fourth hour, Danny had consumed 3 cups of cold coffee from his personal thermos and 2 granola bars that he had found in his jacket pocket. The coffee was terrible and the granola bars were stale, but they kept him moving. The meanwhile had taken shifts according to their safety protocols. They rotated every 90 minutes, resting and hydrating while others took their place. Danny did not rotate, Danny did not rest. They found this deeply concerning. Human Cole, Commander's voice crackled through his communicator. She was watching from the orbital station, monitoring their progress through satellite feeds. Our sensors are detecting an unregistered structure forming at your location. What exactly are you building? Danny looked up at the sky and grinned. Just a place to sleep, Commander, nothing fancy. It does not match any known architectural design in our database. That is because I made it up as I went along. There was a long pause on the other end of the communication. Danny could imagine Commander trying to process that statement, trying to fit it into her understanding of how construction worked. I see, she said finally. Carry on, Human Cole. By the 6th hour, the structure was nearly complete. Danny stood back and looked at what he had created. It was approximately 40 meters long, 20 meters wide, and 4 meters tall at its highest point. The walls were a patchwork of different materials, welded and bolted, and in some places simply jammed together. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, and one corner was definitely not at a 90-degree angle. It was the ugliest building Danny had ever constructed. His father would have laughed at it. His old construction teachers would have failed him on the spot. But it would hold. Danny knew it in his bones, the same way he knew how to breathe or how to walk. Years of building things, of working with materials until they became extensions of his own hands, had given him an instinct that no manual could teach. We need to seal the entrance, Danny said to the gathered workers, and we need to get the team from the eastern ridge. Checked his communicator. They have been trying to construct their own shelter, but they are having difficulties. Their species is not suited for this type of physical labor. Then we go get them. How far is the ridge? 3 kilometers. In normal conditions, a 30-minute walk. But the storm looked at the sky, which had turned almost entirely purple now. The clouds were closer, and Danny could see lightning flickering inside them. The preliminary winds have already begun. Anyone caught outside when the main storm hits will not survive. Danny nodded. Then we better move fast. You stay here and seal this place up. I will get the Human Cole. That is extremely dangerous. Perhaps we should send a... But Danny was already running. He ran across the gray, rocky surface of 4, his boots pounding against alien ground. The wind pushed against him, carrying that strange electrical charge that made his skin tingle and his hair stand up. He could smell ozone, sharp and clean and terrifying. They saw him coming before he reached them. All 5 of them were clustered around a half-built shelter that was clearly not going to be finished in time. Their mandibles clicked rapidly as Danny approached, and their translator device hummed to life. "Human Cole, you should not have come. The storm is almost here." "Yeah, I noticed." Danny bent over to catch his breath, hands on his knees. "Good news is I built something better. Come with me." They looked at each other, having a silent conversation that Danny could not follow. Then their leader, a being named Chitter, stepped forward. "We will trust you, human. Lead the way." They ran back together, the 5 scuttling on their many legs while Danny sprinted ahead. The wind was screaming now, and Danny could see the first real lightning strikes hitting the ground in the distance. They had minutes, maybe less. The structure came into view, with standing at the entrance waving them forward. Danny pushed himself harder, his lungs burning, his legs aching, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. They made it inside just as the sky turned white. The storm had arrived. The sound was like nothing Danny had ever heard before. It was thunder and screaming, and the roar of 1,000 trains all mixed together into one endless noise. The walls of his improvised structure shook and groaned, and for one terrible moment, Danny was certain that everything was about to collapse on top of them. But the walls held, the ceiling held. His ugly, impossible building refused to fall down. Inside the structure, 17 beings sat in darkness. The power cells that Danny had wired together provided basic lighting and atmospheric processing, but nothing more. Emergency mode, he had called it, just enough to keep them alive and breathing. Danny sat with his back against the wall, too exhausted to move. Every muscle in his body ached. His hands were covered in cuts and burns from the welding work, and his throat was raw from shouting orders for 6 straight hours. He had never worked so hard in his entire life. Around him, they sat in organized rows, their silver scales reflecting the dim emergency lights. They were quiet, processing what had happened. They huddled together in one corner, their shells pressed close for comfort. And somewhere above them the storm raged on, trying its best to tear the moon apart. "Human Cole," said softly. He had taken a seat next to Danny, which was unusual for they normally preferred to maintain proper distance from other species. "I owe you an apology." Danny turned his head, too tired to fully look at his friend. "For what?" "When you told us to forget the manual, I thought you were being foolish, reckless. I thought your human stubbornness would kill us all." Paused, his 4-jointed fingers clasping together. "I was wrong. Your stubbornness saved us instead." Danny managed a weak smile. "Do not get too excited yet. We still have to survive the next few hours." As if in response to his words, a massive crack of thunder shook the structure. Somewhere, a panel groaned under the stress, but nothing broke, nothing fell. Danny's building was taking everything the storm could throw at it and standing firm. "I have been thinking," continued, "about what you said earlier, about your father and the tornado, about building tonight so everyone sleeps tomorrow. Is that truly how humans approach construction?" Danny thought about the question for a moment. Outside, lightning struck something close by, and the flash lit up the cracks around the sealed entrance. "Not always," Danny admitted. "When we have time, we plan things out, we draw blueprints, we do calculations, we make sure everything is safe and proper and up to code." He shifted against the wall, trying to find a position that did not hurt. "But when people are in danger, when there is no time for plans, we just build. We use whatever we have. We make it work." "That seems very inefficient." "It is, but efficiency does not matter when someone needs a roof over their head tonight." One of the scientists clicked its mandibles, and the translator device activated. "The human speaks of necessity overriding optimization. This is a concept we understand. Our species once built in similar ways before we achieved, before we had time to plan and design and perfect." Danny looked at them with interest. You used to build like this. Many thousands of years ago, ours was dangerous. Storms, predators, earthquakes. We had to build quickly or die. Over time, as our technology improved, we forgot this ability. We became dependent on proper procedures and optimal designs. The paused. Perhaps we forgot too much. Scales shifted in what Danny had learned was a thoughtful expression. There were never a species that faced such dangers. Ours was calm, stable, predictable. We developed engineering as a science, not as a survival skill. We never learned to improvise because we never had to. That is not a bad thing, Danny said. Your shelters are amazing when you have time to build them properly, better than anything I could design. But useless when time runs out, replied, as we have seen tonight. The storm continued to rage outside. Danny could hear debris hitting the walls, could feel the structure vibrating with each massive gust of wind. But hour after hour passed, and his building did not fall. His ugly, improvised, manual-violating building stood strong against the fury of the universe. Around the fourth hour of the storm, Danny noticed something strange. They had stopped sitting in their organized rows. Some of them had moved closer together, forming small groups. Others had started talking quietly among themselves, and a few had actually closed their eyes and appeared to be sleeping. This is unusual, said, noticing the same thing. Do not sleep in public spaces. It is considered improper. Maybe they feel safe enough to sleep, Danny suggested. Considered this. Perhaps, or perhaps, he trailed off, looking around at the mismatched walls and the sagging ceiling and the floor that was nothing but bare rock covered with scrap insulation. Perhaps there is something about this place that makes it feel different from a standard shelter. Different how? I am not certain. Our emergency shelters are designed for survival. They provide protection, life support, everything needed to keep beings alive until rescue arrives. But they feel like what they are, temporary structures, places to wait. Reached out and touched the wall next to him. It was a cargo container panel, scored with burns from Danny's welding torch and still slightly warm to the touch. This feels different, said. It feels like someone cared about building it, not just for efficiency or safety protocols, but because they wanted everyone inside to survive. Does that make sense? Danny thought about his grandfather, who had built houses during the hardest times in American history. His grandfather used to say that a house was just walls and a roof, but a home was walls and a roof that someone loved into existence. Yeah, Danny said quietly, that makes sense. The storm lasted for 12 hours. By the end, Danny was delirious with exhaustion, drifting in and out of consciousness while the wind howled outside. But every time he woke up, his building was still standing. His home was still protecting the 17 beings who had trusted him with their lives. When the storm finally passed and Commander gave the all-clear, Danny was too tired to move. Helped him to his feet, and together they walked outside to see what remained of the research station. The standard shelters, the ones that had been partially assembled according to the proper procedures, were scattered across the landscape in pieces. The power cells were destroyed. The panels were warped and torn. Nothing remained that could have protected anyone from anything. Only Danny's structure stood intact. Human Cole, Commander's voice came through the communicator. I have been watching your building throughout the storm. Our sensors show that it withstood wind speeds and electromagnetic forces that should have torn it apart. Danny leaned on for support, barely able to keep his eyes open. I guess I got lucky. I do not believe luck had anything to do with it. The Galactic Council will want to speak with you about this, about what you built and how you built it. Danny looked at his ugly, beautiful creation. The walls were scorched and dented. Part of the roof had actually bent inward, though it had not collapsed. It was the most imperfect building he had ever made. And it had saved 17 lives. Tell the council, Danny said sleepily, that I just built a home, that is all. Then he closed his eyes and fell asleep standing up, still leaning on, still surrounded by the building he had created out of nothing but scraps and determination, and a human refusal to give up. 3 weeks after the storm, Danny found himself standing in a room that made him feel very small and very human. The chamber was enormous, carved from some kind of crystal that glowed with its own inner light. Floating platforms held representatives from 18 different spacefaring species, all of them watching Danny with expressions he could not read. This was the Galactic Engineering Council, the governing body that oversaw all major construction projects across known space. These were the beings who designed space stations, built colony ships, and created megastructures that orbited distant stars. They had been building things when humanity was still learning to bang rocks together. And now they wanted to talk to Danny Cole from Ohio. Human designation Danny Cole, said the High Architect. Her name was, and she belonged to a species so old that they had forgotten more about engineering than most civilizations would ever learn. She sat on a crystal perch at the highest point in the chamber, her ancient eyes studying Danny like he was a puzzle to be solved. You have been brought before this council to answer for your actions on 4. Danny swallowed hard. He was wearing his cleanest clothes, which still had grease stains on the collar. He had tried to look professional, but standing in this room full of ancient alien architects, he felt like a child playing dress-up. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "During the Iron Storm emergency, you violated 17 structural codes that are considered universal law across the galactic community. You ignored 4 safety protocols that exist to protect construction workers. You built a structure with no filed permits, no approved designs, and no computational modeling." Danny nodded. There was no point in denying any of it. "That is correct." "Furthermore," High Architect continued, "our analysis of your structure shows that it should not have survived the storm. The materials you used were not designed to work together. The joints you created were improvised and theoretically unstable. According to our simulations, your building had approximately a 23% chance of catastrophic failure." Danny felt his heart sink. He had known that his building was not perfect. He had known that he was taking risks, but hearing it stated so clearly by beings who had mastered the art of construction over thousands of years made him feel foolish. "I understand," Danny said quietly, "and I am sorry for breaking the rules, but with all due respect, if I had followed the rules, 17 people would be dead right now." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some of the alien representatives made sounds or gestures that Danny could not interpret. He wondered if he had said the wrong thing. He wondered if they were about to kick him out of the galactic community entirely. High Architect raised one of her limbs, and the chamber fell silent. "You are correct, Human Cole. 17 beings survived because of your actions, and while your methods were unorthodox and technically illegal, the results speak for themselves." She paused, and Danny could have sworn he saw something like curiosity in her ancient eyes. "The Council has studied the recordings of your construction process. We have analyzed every cut, every weld, every decision you made during those 6 hours. "And?" Danny asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "And we are fascinated." Danny blinked. That was not what he had expected to hear. A representative spoke up. His name was, and he had been present during the official investigation of the 4 incident. "The human structure, our understanding of structural engineering. By all calculations, it should have collapsed. The stress distribution was uneven. The load-bearing elements were placed in suboptimal positions. The materials had conflicting thermal expansion rates." "But it held," another representative said. This one was and Danny recognized the clicking speech patterns. "Against forces that destroyed our own properly designed shelters, the humans' improvised structure held firm." High Architect nodded slowly. "We have spent 3 weeks trying to understand why. Our best engineers have run thousands of simulations, adjusted countless variables, and still cannot fully explain how your building survived. Danny shifted uncomfortably. I do not really know either. I just built what felt right. What felt right, repeated. This phrase has been translated 17 different ways by our linguistic experts, and none of them quite capture its meaning. Can you explain it more fully? Danny thought for a moment. This was a room full of brilliant engineers who had spent their entire lives studying construction as a science. How could he explain something that he barely understood himself? When I build things, Danny said slowly, I do not always think about numbers and calculations. I think about the people who will use what I am building. I think about what they need. And then I try to make something that gives them what they need. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from 18 different worlds. On 4, 17 people needed to survive a storm, so I built something that would protect them from that storm. I did not think about optimal designs or structural codes. I thought about those 17 beings, and I made something that would keep them safe. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then High Architect did something that Danny had never seen a member of her species do before. She made a gesture that his translator interpreted as a smile. Human Cole, she said, the Galactic Council has been building structures for over 15,000 years. In that time, we have developed construction methods that are efficient, reliable, and safe. Our buildings can withstand almost any disaster, last for centuries, and require minimal maintenance. Your buildings are amazing, Danny said honestly. Much better than anything I could design. But they take time to build. Time that, as we saw on 4, is not always available. Leaned forward on her perch. The Council has a proposal for you, Human Cole. We wish to establish a new division within the Galactic Engineering Corps. A rapid response unit for emergency construction scenarios. Danny's breath caught in his throat. A what? A team that can deploy to disaster zones and build habitable structures quickly, using whatever materials are available, without waiting for optimal conditions or perfect designs. A team that can do what you did on 4, but on a larger scale. Spoke again. We have analyzed your performance during the emergency. Despite having no formal training in construction, no knowledge of alien building materials, and no experience with galactic safety protocols, you managed to coordinate a diverse team and complete a complex project in record time. We want you to lead this new division, High Architect said. We want you to teach other species how to build like a human. Danny felt dizzy. He had come into this chamber expecting to be punished, maybe even deported back to Earth. Instead, they were offering him a position that most engineers would dream about. I am not a teacher, Danny said. I am just a guy who knows how to swing a hammer. Then perhaps you can teach others how to swing hammers, replied. The galaxy is vast, Human Cole. Disasters happen every day on thousands of worlds. Storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts. Millions of beings need shelter, and our traditional construction methods cannot help them fast enough. She gestured toward Danny with something that looked almost like hope. You built a home in one night. Imagine what you could do with proper resources and a trained team. Danny thought about his father, who had taught him that building was about more than just construction. It was about giving people a place to belong. He thought about his grandfather, who had built homes during the hardest times his country had ever faced. And he thought about 17 beings on a distant moon, huddled together in an ugly building, surviving a storm because one human refused to give up. Okay, Danny said. I will do it, but I am going to need a team of my own choosing. People from different species who are not afraid to get their hands dirty and throw away the rule book when necessary. High Architect made that smile gesture again. I believe that can be arranged. 1 year had passed since the storm on 4. Danny Cole stood on a hill overlooking a valley that had been empty 3 weeks ago. Now it was filled with buildings, hundreds of them, stretching across the landscape like a patchwork quilt made of metal and hope. Seven had been a thriving colony world until the earthquake hit. 3,000 colonists had lost everything in a single night. Their homes, their belongings, their sense of safety. The Galactic Emergency Response Authority had estimated that it would take 6 months to provide adequate shelter for everyone, using standard construction methods. Danny's team had done it in 18 days. The Rapid Response Construction Unit, known informally as Cole's Crew, had become famous throughout the galaxy. They deployed to disasters anywhere they were needed, arriving with ships full of basic materials and a willingness to build anything, anywhere, under any conditions. The team was unlike any other in galactic history. There were who had learned to ignore their instinct for perfect planning, who had rediscovered their ancestors' ability to adapt and improvise. Humans who had grown up building things with their hands and now taught those skills to alien species. Even a few members of species that had never done physical labor in their entire history, now wielding welding torches and hammers like experts, had been Danny's first recruit and now served as his second in command. The had changed over the past year. His scales still shimmered silver, but his movements were different now. Less precise, more natural. He had learned to trust his instincts instead of always checking the manual. "You are thinking deep thoughts," said, climbing the hill to stand beside Danny. "I can tell because you have that look on your face." Danny smiled. "What look?" "The one where your forehead wrinkles and you stare at nothing. Humans do it when they are processing complex emotions." "I was thinking about my grandfather," Danny admitted. "He died when I was 15, but I still remember the things he taught me, today especially." Below them, the colonists were moving into their new homes. Families carried their salvaged belongings through doorways. Children ran between buildings, exploring their new neighborhood. An elderly being from a species Danny could not identify sat in a chair outside her door, watching the sky with an expression of peaceful contentment. "What did your grandfather teach you?" asked. "That building is not about putting materials together. It is about creating places where people can feel safe, where they can build lives and raise families and be part of a community." Danny paused, watching a young colonist hang something on her wall through a window. "He said that anyone can construct a shelter, but it takes something special to construct a home." Was quiet for a moment, processing the words through his understanding. Then he nodded slowly. "I believe I understand now. The difference between our shelters and what you build is not about engineering quality or material specifications. It is about intention." "Maybe," Danny said. "Or maybe it is about love. My grandfather used to say that a home is just walls and a roof that someone loved into existence." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the new settlement come to life below them. After a while, Danny's communicator beeped with an incoming message. He checked it and smiled. "Commander sends her congratulations," he said. "She also says that the Galactic Council has reviewed our methods and is updating their emergency response protocols to include our approach." Made a sound that Danny had learned was laughter. "The Council is officially endorsing rule-breaking and manual ignoring. That must have been a difficult decision for them. She says they are calling it adaptive construction methodology instead." That sounds much more proper." Danny laughed and put his communicator away. A year ago, he had been a junior engineer on a research station, invisible and unimportant. Now he led a team that had saved thousands of lives across dozens of worlds. But the thing that made him proudest was not the recognition or the success. It was the small moments, like now, watching people move into homes that his team had built, seeing the relief on their faces, the hope in their eyes, knowing that tonight they would sleep somewhere safe. That was what his grandfather had taught him. That was what building was really about. "Danny," a voice called from below. He looked down to see Chitter, the scientist from 4 who had joined his team 6 months ago, that was waving one of her many limbs excitedly. "Come see, the community center is finished." Danny started down the hill, following beside him. The community center was a building at the heart of the new settlement, a place where the colonists could gather and eat together and begin rebuilding their society. Danny had designed it personally, combining elements from half a dozen different construction traditions. It was not the most beautiful building he had ever made. The walls were slightly uneven, and the roof had a few patches where they had run out of matching materials. But when Danny stepped inside and saw the colonists gathering, saw them talking and laughing and sharing food, he knew it was perfect. A young colonist approached him, her eyes wide with wonder. She belonged to a species that Danny did not recognize, with blue skin and delicate antennae that quivered when she spoke. "You are the human who built all this?" she asked. "Me and my team," Danny said. "We just put the pieces together. You are the ones who will make it into a real community." She smiled at him, and Danny was struck by how universal some expressions were across species. Joy looked the same no matter what world you came from. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for giving us a home." Later that night, Danny sat outside his temporary shelter, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, another disaster was waiting to happen. Another group of beings would lose everything and need someone to help them rebuild. His team would be ready. They always were. Commander's voice came through his communicator one last time before he went asleep. "Human Cole, I am transmitting my official report to the Galactic Council. I thought you might want to hear the conclusion." "Go ahead," Danny said. "The humans continue to defy our expectations. They build too fast, plan too little, and somehow succeed where our careful methods fail. I have come to believe that this is not despite their chaotic approach, but because of it. They do not build for efficiency or elegance. They build for each other." Danny smiled and closed his eyes. "Recommendation," continued. "When the next disaster strikes, send the humans first. They will have homes standing before we have finished reading the instruction manual." Above Danny, the stars wheeled slowly through the sky of an alien world. Below him, 3,000 colonists slept peacefully in homes that had not existed 3 weeks ago. And somewhere deep in his chest, Danny felt a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. His grandfather had been right. A home was just walls and a roof that someone loved into existence. And Danny Cole loved building them.